Resuming debate, the honourable member for Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a very real honour to rise today to speak to this motion. Just on a personal note, you know, democratic reform has always been a very high topic for me, and it was a big one for a lot of my constituents during the election as well. And I also want to just pay some very good attention and give credit to where it's due to my friend from Skeena-Bulkley Valley. I think it's absolutely incredible that we are creating a committee with 12 members where the government, which has a majority in this House, does not have a majority on the committee. And that is a big step forward. Yep. The NDP has had a long tradition of fighting for fairness, and when you look at the way that our parliament is elected under first past the post, I mean, you look across to the government side, they have all of those seats plus what we like to call the rump over there. And that majority is based on false premises, because 39.5% of Canadians voted Liberal in the last election. But by giving them the majority of the seats, we have basically got an elected dictatorship. Yes, I admit that the Liberal Party, while in government, has been working with us in the opposition on some issues. On others, they have moved forward with time allocation. But I guess the main point I want to get across is that at the end of the day, if the Liberal government really wants to get its way, it can do so. It has the votes in this House to make its voice heard, to get its agenda through. And it has demonstrated that a few times. But being based on the fact that only 39.5% of Canadians voted for that, I think that's where questions of legitimacy always come up. I think that because we are dealing with such an important measure, it's important that all parties in this House have a voice. And the previous idea that was floated by the Liberal government to create a standing committee that mirrors the existing ones, where the governing party gets 6 members, the Conservatives get 3, and the NDP gets 1, but the Bloc and the Greens get to attend but have observer status only, I think that does a lot of disservice to the Canadians that voted for those other political parties, but also it does not give respect to the proportion in which Canadians voted for those other parties. And I'd like to give you an example, Mr. Speaker. You know, Andrew Coyne, the journalist, has been writing some great articles lately on democratic reform. And in one of his articles, he pointed out that it took roughly 38,000 votes to elect each Liberal member of Parliament. By contrast, it took 57,000 votes to elect each Conservative, 79,000 votes for each New Democrat, and 82,000 for each member of the Bloc Québécois. For my friend from Saanich Gulf Islands, it took 603,000 people to vote her in. So that is not a fair system. If you are not going to respect the people who made those choices, they really do need to have a say at the table. And, you know, this is only just the first step, Mr. Speaker. I don't want to presuppose what the committee is going to do. I think at this stage, it's almost like having a bill at second reading. We want to support the committee's work in principle, but I really think it's important before we pass judgment on that committee is that we give it a chance to form, we give it a chance to meet with witnesses, to speak to experts, to deliberate like we were sent here to do, and to do so in good faith based on a rough proportion of the votes that each one of those parties received. I think we owe it to ourselves to let that committee to do its work before we pass judgment and presuppose exactly what they're going to do. One of the things, you know, I've been incredibly proud to be a member of the New Democratic Party because we've always had a long stance on supporting proportional representation. And I know I've heard some members speak in this chamber. They say they don't want to sort of prejudge what Canadians want. They don't want to come with a preformed opinion. And that's fine. I respect that. But I've always felt that having the number of MPs in the House that closely mirrors what the national average is only fair. It really goes to the heart of the matter of having equal votes for every Canadian and having one Canadian and one vote. I think I'll also take some time here to sort of talk about some legislation that I had the honor of introducing on Tuesday. Bill C-279 is a part of this continuing conversation that we as parliamentarians have to have on democratic reform, because while we talk on how we elect our members, I think we also need to talk about some of the situations that exist around how we elect people, some of the money that's being spent, and how long our elections are. For example, in the previous Parliament, the Conservatives passed what was known as the Fair Elections Act. And one of the parts of that change were that for every day an election went over 37 days, the spending limits of each party, it translated to roughly $675,000 each day for when a party's national campaign went over 37 days. And so as a result, we have this difference. In 2011, political parties could spend $21 million, while during the 2015 78-day marathon, parties could bring their limit up to $55 million. And I think that we are slowly heading down a road where money starts playing a larger role. I think that it really distorts the view that many Canadians hold when we are giving such importance to wealthy donors and so on. But also the other thing too is that Canadians don't need to have 78 days to make a decision. My bill proposes to put a maximum limit of 46 days on an electoral period while keeping the minimum at 36. And I really hope that as we discuss this issue of democratic reform, that I can invite all members of this House to have a constructive conversation on how long our elections are. Because the other thing, too, that I think all members will want to take stock of is the cost to taxpayers. Because, Mr. Speaker, the previous election cost us $473 million to run, which was $150 million more than the previous election. So democratic reform can't simply stop at how we elect our members. We also have to look at how the influence of money and what that plays in our politics. And before I continue, Mr. Speaker, I forgot to remind you that I will be splitting my time with my great friend, the Honourable Member for Victoria. Rookie mistake. So I would like to just go on, Mr. Speaker, and just say that this is a big deal today. And to my friends in the government, the Liberal caucus, you deserve congratulations. You deserve credit where credit is due. That was a big step. I was watching the minister on CPAC this morning, and when I heard her say that the government would support this motion, I was genuinely impressed. So congratulations to them for doing that. It's my hope that by the government giving up its majority on that, and by all other opposition parties suddenly having that legitimacy, we can find a way to work together. Because my colleague from Skeena-Bulkley Valley, he proposed this new method back in February. Well, Mr. Speaker, we're now in June, and I think the minister was quite correct in saying that, the government was getting worried that we're just getting bogged down in process. And that's true. I think we need to move beyond process and get to some more substantive debate. We need to hear from experts. We need to hear from witnesses. We need to give that committee all of the tools it needs to have to consult with Canadians. Now, I'm going to leave it up to the committee to decide what course of action is right. But in the end, I strongly feel we need to give that committee the time to do so. Seeing as that I have just a minute left, Mr. Speaker, I will conclude by just saying that, one of the phrases that inspired me to run as a New Democrat came from our late leader, the Honourable Jack Layton. And his words were that, I think it was shortly after we formed official opposition in the previous Parliament, he said it's not enough just to be opposing, but you have to propose solutions. And my friend from Skeena-Bulkley Valley is enduring the spirit of that phrase in the truest way today, because since February, he's come up with a practical solution. Instead of just shooting down what the government's been offering, he has said, well, you know what? There's a different way. This is our constructive alternative. And today the government accepted that. So I will end there, Mr. Speaker, and I have already done it. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, seriously. Questions and comments? Questions and comments? The honourable member for, the honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Employment and Workforce Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I was saying, Mr. Speaker, it wasn't until before I was so graciously interrupted. The last Parliament certainly didn't serve us well. I don't think there was no real attempt to make it right. And when you make it right in committee and you make it right for stakeholders on particular issues, you make it right for Canadians. And I think that's what's ahead of us here. That's the opportunity that we have, and we certainly heard that over the course of the election. I would hope. I think this is something that we can live with. I think it's something that we should all encourage our colleagues to go out and engage. And I would hope that that's what this initiative prompts is all members of Parliament from all parties to go out and engage and hopefully come out with good quality recommendations to move forward. It was something that I certainly heard over the course of the last election, that Canadians wanted that change and wanted an adult conversation about it. And I think that's what today's motion allows us to do, and that's why I look forward to supporting it.
The honourable member for Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend from Cape Breton Council for the question. He may know that I had the honour and privilege of working for Jean Crowder for 7 years as a constituency assistant, and she sat in 4 different parliaments, so she was quite a veteran of this place. And in the previous parliament, she was the official opposition critic for Aboriginal Affairs. So I know very well from working for an MP for 7 years what committees devolved into. And indeed, I think he will agree with me, there was even a special handbook that had been presented on how to obstruct committee business. So it's my hope that we can leave the past as the past. We should learn from it. But I hope that we go forward with a renewed sense of purpose, that we don't presuppose or prejudge what the committee is going to do, and we accept the fact that this new structure is now more fair. You've given up your majority, or the government's given up its majority voluntarily, and let's let it get formed and continue its work.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The honourable member for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to my member opposite for his words today. I think any of us in this place could come up with maybe half a dozen different ways to vote. And I think that's fair because we're in this place and we're engaged. But I'll use an analogy that my predecessor used, and I think it's a good one. It's because we're Canadian, it's a hockey analogy. When the general managers for the NHL get together every year to discuss rule changes, usually the general managers with the smaller teams would want less fighting and more penalties. And those with the bigger teams would want more fighting and less penalties because it's to their advantage. So we're striking a committee based on political people changing the rules on how we vote without having that final say. Because someone makes that decision. You can, like we said, we can come up with a half dozen options, but somebody has to make this decision. And it's not that the general managers are bad people or that we're bad people. It's just we're in the game. Somebody makes that decision. So how, without saying, with that final decision after all the consultation we talked about, how can we not say, let's give the people the opportunity to vote on this preferred method at the end of the day through a referendum?
For Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think I'll just go back to my comments about not presupposing or prejudging the committee's work. And what I would say to my honourable colleague is that the 3 Conservative members who will be sitting on this committee should be bringing that case forward while they're in committee. If they feel strongly that a referendum is the answer, bring forward witnesses and experts on previous referendums, let them present the evidence, and make a strong case for it. But I think enough talk about the process right now. Let's let the committee do its work. And I hope they make a strong case in that committee, because now they will not have 6 Liberals who have a final say. You're going to have the ability to work with all parties on this measure. And in this place, if you have a valid argument and you can back it up with strong facts, well, hopefully that's what will win the day.
Resuming debate. The